Hi, my name is Carrie Alexander. I am the speech and language pathologist on the assistive technology team with Poudre School District. This training, an introduction to alternative and augmentative communication, is intended for teachers, paraprofessionals, and parents of students who have recently received a communication device. I hope you enjoy this training. Thanks.
Our objectives for this training are to define AAC, to understand the importance of communication, to learn strategies for teaching AAC, and to know where to go for more resources. We will not be covering device-specific information in this training. Alternative and augmentative communication is any communication other than verbal speech. Examples include sign language, low-tech picture cards and books, recordable devices, and high-tech dynamic display devices. Typical developing students come to school with intact language and can communicate successfully, but students with complex communication needs may not yet have an effective means of communicating. It is our job as educators to teach them how to communicate. This slide is a reminder of just how important communication is. Communication is fundamental to all aspects of life. It is important for the quality of life. It is a foundation for learning and a human right. It enables people to be independent, to build relationships with others, to get their needs met, to express their thoughts and feelings. Imagine what it would be like to not be able to communicate all of these things. That is why communication is so important. I encourage you to look at the link for the Communication Bill of Rights by the National Joint Committee for the Communication Needs of Persons with Severe Disabilities. Before we move forward, we need to dispel some of the myths about AAC. AAC hinders or stops further speech development. The truth is, research has shown that AAC does not impede speech development and, in fact, can enhance it. That AAC is a last resort in speech language intervention. The truth is, AAC should be considered for any child whose communication needs are not being met. That children must have a certain set of skills to be able to benefit from AAC. The truth is, no prerequisites exist for AAC. Children with a wide variety of cognitive abilities benefit from AAC. That children have to be a certain age to be able to benefit from AAC. The truth is, AAC can be employed in ways to benefit anyone who has complex communication needs, regardless of their age, physical, or cognitive abilities and disabilities. It's never too early or too late to start AAC. I love this quote by Dr. David Buchelman. Having a communication device doesn't make you an effective communicator any more than having a piano makes you a musician. What that simply means is that we need to be intentionally teaching our students how to communicate using their AAC. Many students with complex communication needs need to have access to a robust vocabulary from the beginning. This is an example of one of those vocabularies. As you can see, there are many symbols on the page, which can be overwhelming for both students and their communication partners. Here is that same page with only the words showing. As literate adults, we recognize those word symbols. Realize that when you are initially looking at the student's vocabulary, you, as the adult, are really looking at those labels. This slide shows us what the students are really seeing. Most of our students are not yet literate, and so they are really more focused on the symbols. Take a moment to look at the slide and ask yourself if you could start communicating without anyone teaching you what those symbols mean. Perhaps you could figure out the symbol stop, but I would bet that most of you don't know what the other symbols mean yet. That is why it is so important that we teach, model, and provide a lot of opportunities for our students to learn the meaning and location of these symbols so that they can use them to communicate. As I stated before, initially having a lot of symbols on a page can be overwhelming, but it is necessary for several reasons. The most important reason is that we need to provide enough vocabulary to meet all of the students' communication needs and to provide enough vocabulary so that they will continue to develop their language skills. By age 5, most children will have an expressive vocabulary of 2,100 words. That is a lot of symbols on a communication device. The less buttons that are on the page means that you have to navigate more to access the vocabulary. That increases the cognitive demand, not lessens it. You and the student will quickly learn where the symbols are located on the device with repeated use. This is due to motor learning. I'm sure that you know where all of the letters are located on a QWERTY keyboard. You are able to type your name, words, and sentences very quickly because of your repeated use of this layout. However, if I took your keyboard and switched around all of the letters, you would have to relearn where all of those letters are located, and you would struggle to type those words quickly. This is what happens when we start students out with fewer buttons on a page set and then change them every time their expressive language increases. They have to relearn the location of those buttons every time we increase the number of buttons on their pages. So it is better to start them with more buttons on a page so that we do not have to change their layout. Another benefit to having more buttons and not less is that you will need to do less programming on the device because the vocabulary will already be available. Here's an example of less buttons versus more buttons. Would you rather send a text with a flip phone where you have to press the number button 2 or 3 times to get to a letter? Or would you rather use a smartphone using a full keyboard? One argument that I frequently encounter is that communication partners feel that having a lot of buttons is too overwhelming for students. In reality, once a student has been taught the meaning and appropriate use of a symbol, they can pick it out easily from an array of symbols that they don't know. On the next slide, you will see an array of symbols, and my guess is that you will only know one of those symbols. When you recognize that symbol, I want you to say it out loud. Did you recognize the symbol go from the array of symbols that you don't know? That is because that symbol, the word go, is a symbol that you have learned. Somebody has taught you that the letter G and O means go, and you say go. Symbols need to be taught for students to recognize them. But did you really have a hard time picking that symbol out of all those other symbols that you don't recognize? My guess is no. You may have visually scanned it, but you probably picked out that symbol very quickly. What I have found is that once our students have learned the meaning of a symbol, that they are also able to pick out that symbol quickly from the array of symbols that they have not yet learned. It is very rarely that I've encountered a student who has sufficiently learned the meaning of a symbol and is not able to pick it out of an array of symbols. So, how do we teach a child to use a communication device? The same way we would teach a typically developing child how to speak. That is through modeling. Another term we use is called aided language stimulation. Aided language stimulation is when a communication partner uses the device to communicate to the child. This is done by simultaneously selecting vocabulary on the device and speaking. Typical developing children will need to hear a word spoken many, many times before they will attempt to use that word expressively. We know through research that a child that uses a communication device needs to have a word modeled to them at least 50 to 150 times before they will start using the word. In the next video, you will see a communication partner modeling the use of symbols to the student as she is speaking. Notice how she is using complete sentences and only modeling key vocabulary to the student.
I have my words in here. Let me put the words up here so you can reach them. And why don't you pick something out of my bag? Can you pick something out? Or do you want to choose off of here? What do you have to tell me? I want bubbles? Absolutely. Let me find my bubbles. Here they are. Here's my bubbles. Do you want to blow bubbles? Bubbles are for blowing. Do you want to blow? Or do you want me to blow? You want to blow. Ready? Set? Blow. Do you need some help? Help? Can I help you?
Teachers, if I could have your attention for expediency, and I know I'm...
Oh, did you get on your eye?
Third, fourth, and fifth grade.
Are you all done? Do you want more
Start with the
bubbles?
third grade. Teachers just
More?
need to look out the window.
Okay, let's
We
do
need to pack
more.
the
Do you do
floor.
more or all done?
Get on the first bus, roll them in.
All done.
In the video, the communication partner communicated naturally with the student. She also modeled without the expectation that the student would imitate her immediately. With typically developing children, we do not expect them to imitate us every time we model spoken words to them, but this is often the case for students who use AAC. This is a visual further explaining how aided language stimulation works. Spoken language is modeled to typically developing children who will then learn to express themselves with speech. Spoken language is also modeled to children who are not able to use speech to express themselves. This leaves them without a means of expression. But when we use aided language stimulation with spoken language, these children will learn to express themselves using their AAC. Here are the key things you need to know about aided language stimulation. Speak and then model on the device at the same time. You do not have to model every single word that you say. Model one more word than their current language level. If your child or student has just received their communication device, you would be modeling just one word at a time. Model without the expectation that they will imitate you every time. It is okay if you make mistakes or are slow while modeling. It takes a lot of modeling before an AAC user will learn the word, so just keep modeling. Identify key words within your daily routines to model every day. Respond meaningfully to any communication attempt, regardless if the person meant it. So, what words should you model? The first thing we want to teach a child that uses AAC is that communication is powerful. And when they use their communication system, good things happen. For that reason, I recommend first teaching them to communicate words that are highly motivating to them. For example, you might teach them to request their favorite foods, toys, or activities. Then I recommend modeling words that are considered their personal core words, such as names of family, friends, and pets. Then we want to start teaching core words. Core words are high frequency words that make up 80% of what we say. There are about 200 to 300 identified core words. These words can be used across many different contexts, which makes them flexible. Example of these words include want, help, like, and go. AAC is 15 times slower than natural speech and is limited in the number of vocabulary words. Therefore, if we teach core words, AAC users can quickly access these words to talk about any subject. Fringe vocabulary is used less frequently and is typically made up of nouns. Words like elephant and monkey are fringe words. These are words you might use if you went to a zoo, but most people don't say these words frequently throughout the day like they do core words. Here are some symbols of the top 36 core words that you will find on many communication devices. I want you to pause the video at this point and I want you to think of some messages that you can create using these core words to talk about what you are thinking about this presentation so far. I will come back in a couple seconds and I will give you some of the messages I have composed. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video and looked at the symbols and could combine some symbols to create some messages about what you think of this presentation. You may have created some of these messages. I like it, or it good, or I want more. Or maybe you didn't like the presentation so much and you were composing messages like I not like, or it not good, or maybe even you go or you finished. And that's okay. But you can see that you can combine a lot of these core words to create many messages to communicate about any topic, really. The other great thing about core vocabulary is that these words are often located on the very first page of communication devices. Because it's on the first page, these symbols are going to be easy for you to locate and to model with. So I encourage you to take a look at your student or child's communication device, look at that first page to see what core words are readily available. We also teach AAC by using prompting strategies. Here is a prompting hierarchy that goes from least to most invasive. When we teach a vocabulary word for the first time, we use the least invasive prompt that is necessary to elicit a response. Then we should fade that prompt as quickly as possible so that the child does not become dependent on the prompt. Full physical prompts should be avoided since research has shown that it is not an effective means for learning a new skill. In addition, if we force a child to communicate a message with a full physical prompt, they may develop a negative association with their communication device. The best and sometimes most effective way to get a child to communicate is to just wait. This can seem uncomfortable, but our students have learned that if they do nothing, someone will step in and do it for them. So we need to wait them out. Other strategies for teaching AAC include attributing meaning, which means that when a child activates their device, that we respond meaningfully whether it was intentional or not. Following the child's lead and communicating about topics that are meaningful to them. Using sabotage and communicative temptations, like putting toys out of reach so that they need to ask for them. Teaching vocabulary within daily routines. Make more comments than questions. This takes the pressure off of children to communicate and is a more natural way of communicating. Students with significant disabilities often get quizzed all day long because educators want to know what they know, but this is not meaningful or motivating for the students. Use expansion and recast. This means to simply model messages that are one word longer than what they are currently communicating. We are not going to get into programming in this training. However, I did want to touch on some programming considerations. The first thing you should do is use the word finder feature on the device to see if the word already exists in the system. If it does, just teach that pathway. If it isn't located in the device, ask yourself if it is a frequently used word. If it isn't a word that a user will use daily or at least weekly, don't waste precious real estate by programming it into the device. Instead, use descriptive words to talk about the concept. For example, precipitation is not a word most children use frequently. If we wanted to teach about the word, we could use more frequently used words, such as snow, rain, and wet. If the word is frequently used, program it in its respective linguistic category. Do not program words on an activity specific page. We want our students to learn to access their vocabulary in any activity or setting. As a recap, here are some do's and don'ts of teaching AAC. Do teach students how to communicate with their device. Don't just expect a user to know how to communicate with AAC without direct instruction. Do make their AAC available to them at all times. Resist the temptation to remove the device when the student is being disruptive. Treat the student using AAC like any other student who is verbal. Do allow them to explore their device. Some of our best AAC users are ones that have taught themselves the location of the vocabulary by simply exploring. So don't stop all that babbling. Use fun, motivating, and natural activities to teach communication. Don't expect sentences right away. Language develops in the similar pattern as with verbal speech. Do teach core words and presume competence, and try not to overprompt. To get started with your student or child with their AAC device, first make a plan of what words and symbols you are going to teach. Those should include core words, personal core words, and motivating nouns. Next, find where those words, symbols, and vocabulary is located on the device. I will tell you that every device has a find a word feature. Lastly, teach that vocabulary within daily routines and fun, motivating, natural activities. For more resources, please visit our website at SWAC, swaac.psdschools.org. On our website, we have a lot of resources for alternative and augmentative communication, including device support with training videos, implementation resources, and at home implementation resources. Check it out.
I hope you enjoyed this training. If you have any questions or need additional information or training, please feel free to email me, or if you are a staff member, put in a help desk ticket and request a SWAC consultation. Thank you.